Nobody is coming to save you. Not your boss, not the economy, not the perfect opportunity you keep waiting for. The life you want will not arrive through luck or permission. It will only come when you decide to take full ownership of who you are and where you're going. Most people stay stuck because they believe success starts somewhere else, with more time, more motivation, more support. That belief is comfortable, and comfort is exactly what keeps them average. The truth is simple and uncomfortable. If your life isn't changing, it's because you aren't changing. Success doesn't begin with inspiration. It begins with responsibility. The moment you stop blaming circumstances and start controlling your actions, everything shifts. Your habits, your discipline, and your daily choices become the foundation of your future, whether you like it or not. This book is not here to motivate you. Motivation fades. This is about building the discipline to show up when you don't feel like it, to do the work when no one is watching, and to choose growth when comfort feels easier. If you're ready to stop waiting and start leading your own life, turn the page. Because success doesn't start tomorrow. It starts with you. No one is coming to save you. The truth about taking control of your life. Listen, I need to tell you something that might be hard to hear at first, but it's the most liberating truth you'll ever understand. No one is coming to save you. Not your parents, not your friends, not the government, not some lucky break, not a miracle, and definitely not some savior figure who's going to swoop in at the last minute and fix everything that's wrong in your life. In America, and really anywhere in the world, the people who achieve real success, the ones who build extraordinary lives, the ones who break through barriers and create something meaningful, they all have one thing in common. They stopped waiting for rescue and started rescuing themselves. This isn't meant to sound harsh or cold. It's actually the most empowering realization you can have, because once you truly accept that your life is entirely your responsibility, that's when everything changes. Think about it for a moment. When you were a child, it made sense to wait for someone to save you. If you were hungry, your parents fed you. If you were scared, they comforted you. If you had a problem, the adults in your life stepped in to solve it. But somewhere along the way to adulthood, many people never make the mental shift from being someone who needs saving to being someone who does the saving. They carry that childhood expectation into their 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond, always looking outward for solutions instead of looking inward for strength. They wait for the perfect job opportunity to land in their lap. They wait for someone to recognize their talent. They wait for the economy to get better. They wait for the right relationship to complete them. They wait for confidence to magically appear. They wait for motivation to strike like lightning. And while they're waiting, years pass by, opportunities slip away, and life happens to them instead of them happening to life. The uncomfortable truth is that this waiting is a form of giving away your power. And when you give away your power, you give away your ability to create the life you actually want. Now, I'm not saying that help doesn't exist or that community doesn't matter or that we should all be isolated islands doing everything alone. That's not the point at all. Of course, we need other people. Of course, collaboration is valuable. Of course, asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. But there's a fundamental difference between seeking support while taking ownership of your journey versus sitting passively and expecting someone else to do the heavy lifting for you. The people who succeed understand this distinction perfectly. They know that mentors can guide, but can't walk the path for them. They know that opportunities can be presented, but must be seized by their own hands. They know that resources can be available, but must be utilized through their own effort. They take 100% responsibility for their circumstances, even when those circumstances weren't their fault. And yes, that's a crucial point, because life isn't fair. Terrible things happen to good people. Some folks start with advantages others will never have. Systemic barriers are real. Discrimination exists. Trauma is real. And acknowledging all of this doesn't contradict the central message. You can recognize that you didn't create all your problems while simultaneously accepting that you're the only one who can solve them. This is where real power lives, in that space between acknowledging external factors and claiming internal agency. When you blame your circumstances entirely on external forces, you become a victim of those forces forever. When you take responsibility, Even for things that weren't your fault, you become the author of your own story. Viktor Frankl survived the Nazi concentration camps and came out believing that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. If someone who endured that level of horror could claim agency over their mindset and their future, what's your excuse? I say that with love, but seriously, what's your excuse? Are you waiting for your boss to finally recognize your worth and give you that promotion? Stop waiting and either prove your value so undeniably that it can't be ignored, or go find somewhere else that will appreciate what you bring. Are you waiting for your finances to magically improve? Stop waiting and start learning about money. Start budgeting. Start that side hustle. Start investing, even if it's just tiny amounts. Start making different choices with every dollar. Are you waiting to feel motivated before you start exercising or eating better? Stop waiting, because motivation is a result of action, not a prerequisite for it. Are you waiting for your relationships to get better on their own? Stop waiting and start having difficult conversations. Start setting boundaries. Start being the partner or friend or family member you wish others would be. Are you waiting to feel less anxious or depressed before you pursue your dreams? Stop waiting and start pursuing them anyway, with the anxiety, with the depression, while simultaneously getting the help you need. Because mental health struggles are valid, but they don't have to completely pause your forward motion. The pattern is always the same. Stop waiting, start moving. The American dream, whatever that means to you, isn't something that happens to you. It's something you build with your own hands, day after day, choice after choice, sacrifice after sacrifice. Every successful person you admire, every entrepreneur who built something from nothing, every artist who created something beautiful, every athlete who achieved greatness, every person who transformed their life, they all had moments of doubt, moments of fear, moments when they wanted someone to save them, but they pushed through anyway. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They created conditions. They didn't wait for permission. They gave themselves permission. They didn't wait to feel ready. They started before they were ready and figured it out along the way. And here's something beautiful that happens when you truly internalize this message. You stop feeling like a victim and start feeling like a creator. The anxiety that comes from waiting for external salvation transforms into the excitement that comes from internal creation. Yes, it's scary to accept that no one is coming to save you, but it's also incredibly freeing, because it means you're not trapped waiting for someone else's timeline or someone else's decision or someone else's approval. You can start right now, today, this moment. You can make one small decision that moves you forward. You can send that email, make that phone call, have that conversation, start that project, take that class, read that book, do that workout, cook that healthy meal, set that boundary, apologize for that mistake, apply for that position. Whatever it is that you've been putting off until conditions were perfect, or until someone saved you from having to do the scary thing. The conditions will never be perfect, and no one is coming, so you might as well start now. And when you do start, when you take that first step, and then the next, and then the next, something magical happens. You start to save yourself, and in saving yourself, you become the kind of person who can actually help save others too. You become the mentor instead of always seeking the mentor. You become the opportunity creator instead of always seeking the opportunity. You become the solution instead of always seeking the solution. This is how strong people are made. This is how strong communities are built. This is how real change happens in the world. It starts with individuals who refuse to wait for rescue and instead become their own heroes. So if you take nothing else from this, take this. Your life is your responsibility, entirely and completely yours. And that's not a burden. That's your greatest power, because it means you're not dependent on anyone else's choices to create the life you want to live. No one is coming to save you. And that's the best news you'll hear all day, because it means you can save yourself, and you can start right now. Take 100% ownership, the secret power that changes everything. Let me share something with you that will completely transform how you see your life and your circumstances. The moment you take 100% ownership of everything in your life, absolutely everything, that's the exact moment you gain 100% of the power to change it. There's this blame culture that exists everywhere you look, people constantly pointing fingers at others, at the economy, at their parents, at their boss, at the system, at society, at their past, at bad luck, at anything and everything except themselves. And here's what you need to understand about blame. It feels good in a moment because it releases you from responsibility. It gives you someone or something to be angry at. It provides a neat explanation for why things aren't working out. But blame is actually poison disguised as medicine, because every time you blame something external for your situation, you're giving away your power to that external thing. When you say, "It's my boss's fault, I'm not succeeding," you're making your boss more powerful than you. When you say, "It's the economy's fault, I'm broke," you're making the economy more powerful than you. When you say, "It's my childhood's fault, I can't be happy," you're making your past more powerful than your present. This is why blame culture is the domain of weak people. Not because they're bad people or because they don't have valid reasons to feel hurt or wronged, but because blame keeps them weak. It keeps them stuck. It keeps them waiting for external circumstances to change before they can move forward. And that's a game you can never win, because you can't control external circumstances. You can only control your response to them. Strong people, truly strong people, they understand this fundamental truth, and that's why they have a completely different phrase they use constantly. It's on me. 3 simple words that carry more power than any excuse ever could. It's on me means I'm responsible. It means I'm accountable. It means I have the power to change this. It means I'm not a victim. It means I'm in control. When something goes wrong in their business, strong leaders don't immediately start pointing at their team members or market conditions. They say, "It's on me. What could I have done differently?" When a project fails, they don't blame the resources or the timeline. They say, "It's on me. How can I improve next time?" When a relationship struggles, they don't just list everything the other person did wrong. They say, "It's on me too. What's my part in this dynamic?" This isn't about being a doormat or accepting blame for things that genuinely aren't your fault. And it's not about ignoring reality or pretending that external factors don't exist, because they absolutely do exist. Discrimination is real. Systemic barriers are real. Terrible luck happens. People do genuinely wrong by others, and none of that is negated by taking ownership. But here's the key distinction. You can acknowledge that something wasn't your fault while still taking ownership of what you do next. You can say, "What happened to me wasn't fair, but what I do about it is entirely my responsibility." You see, there's a massive difference between fault and responsibility. Fault looks backward and asks, "Who caused this?" While responsibility looks forward and asks, "Who's going to fix this?" You might not be at fault for your circumstances, but you're responsible for what you do with them. This is the ownership mindset that separates people who stay stuck from people who break through. Think about it in practical terms. If someone rear-ends your car at a red light, it's clearly their fault, not yours. You did nothing wrong. They're the one who should have been paying attention. Their insurance should pay for the damage. But even though it's not your fault, you're still the one who has to deal with the consequences. You have to take ownership of getting your car fixed, dealing with insurance companies, finding alternative transportation, managing your time differently. And if you sit around just being angry that it happened and blaming the other driver and waiting for them to make everything perfect again, you're going to have a miserable experience. But if you take ownership and say, "Okay, this wasn't my fault, but it's my responsibility to handle it effectively," then you move through the situation with agency and power. This principle applies to everything in life, everything. Your health isn't what you want it to be. Maybe genetics play a role. Maybe you have a medical condition. Maybe you grew up in a food desert without access to healthy options. All of that can be true and acknowledged, but right now, today, who's responsible for making your health better? You are. It's on you. Your financial situation is stressful. Maybe you weren't taught about money growing up. Maybe you've faced job discrimination. Maybe you made mistakes when you were younger. Maybe you've had unexpected medical bills or family emergencies. All valid, all real. But right now, who's responsible for improving your financial situation? You are. It's on you. Your relationships aren't fulfilling. Maybe you've been hurt before. Maybe you have attachment issues from childhood. Maybe you've dated wrong people. Maybe you live somewhere where it's hard to meet compatible people, all understandable. But right now, who's responsible for creating better relationships in your life? You are. It's on you. Your career isn't where you want it to be. Maybe your industry changed. Maybe you didn't have the same opportunities as others. Maybe you chose the wrong major. Maybe you've had bad bosses. All true for many people. But right now, who's responsible for taking your career to the next level? You are, it's on you. Do you see the pattern? Taking ownership doesn't erase history or deny reality. It simply puts you in the driver's seat of your future. And here's where it gets really interesting. When you take ownership, when you truly adopt the "it's on me" mindset, something shifts in how other people see you and respond to you. People respect ownership. They're drawn to it. They want to work with people who take responsibility rather than make excuses. If you're a leader and something goes wrong on your team, the team members who witnessed you take ownership rather than throw them under the bus will be loyal to you forever because they know you have their back. If you're in a relationship and you take ownership of your part in conflicts rather than just defending and blaming, your partner will likely soften and start examining their own behavior too, because ownership is contagious. If you're an employee and you take ownership of mistakes and immediately focus on solutions rather than excuses, your bosses will trust you with more responsibility and bigger opportunities. Ownership creates credibility, blame destroys it. Every single time you say "it's not my fault," or "I couldn't help it," or "they made me do it," or "I had no choice," you're training yourself to be powerless. You're reinforcing a victim identity. You're building neural pathways that look for external causes rather than internal agency. And over time, this becomes your default way of seeing the world and yourself in it. But every single time you say "it's on me," or "I'm responsible," or "I could have done better," or "I'll handle it," you're training yourself to be powerful. You're reinforcing a creator identity. You're building neural pathways that look for what you can control and influence. And over time, this becomes your superpower. Now, I want to be clear about something because this message can be misunderstood. Taking 100% ownership doesn't mean being harsh or cruel to yourself. It doesn't mean ignoring self-compassion. It doesn't mean beating yourself up over every little thing. It doesn't mean pretending you're perfect or should never need help. You can take ownership while also being kind to yourself. You can acknowledge, "I made a mistake and I'm responsible for fixing it," while also saying, "I'm human and humans make mistakes and I can learn and grow from this." You can take ownership while also asking for help. In fact, taking ownership often means recognizing when you need support and taking responsibility for seeking it out. The ownership mindset is actually deeply connected to self-respect because when you take ownership, you're saying, "I'm capable, I'm competent, I'm powerful enough to handle my own life." And that's a form of honoring yourself. Here's a practical exercise you can start doing right now. For the next week, catch yourself every time you start to blame something external for a problem in your life. And, really catch yourself in the act. Notice when you're about to say "traffic made me late," or "my coworker messed up the project," or "I don't have time to exercise," or "my parents never taught me that," or whatever your particular flavor of blame tends to be. And when you catch yourself, pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, what's the ownership version of this statement? Instead of "traffic made me late," try "I didn't leave early enough to account for possible traffic." Instead of "my coworker messed up the project," try "I could have communicated expectations more clearly or checked in earlier." Instead of "I don't have time to exercise," try "I haven't prioritized exercise in my schedule." Instead of "my parents never taught me that," try "it's my responsibility to learn it now." Notice how different these statements feel. Notice how the ownership version gives you power and options while the blame version leaves you helpless and stuck. This isn't just semantic wordplay. This is literally rewiring your brain to see yourself as the agent of your life rather than the victim of your circumstances. And yes, this is hard. Taking ownership is much harder than blaming because it requires maturity, courage, and a willingness to be uncomfortable. It means giving up the temporary comfort of excuses and accepting the permanent discomfort of responsibility. But this is exactly why it's so powerful and why so few people actually do it consistently. Most people will read this or hear this message and nod along and think, "Yes, that makes sense," and then go right back to their blame patterns because blame is easier. It's more socially acceptable. It's what everyone around them is doing, and change is hard. But you're not most people, are you? You're someone who's looking for the truth, looking for what actually works, looking for the key that unlocks your potential. And I'm telling you right now, this is it. This is the key. Take 100% ownership of your life, of your choices, of your reactions, of your future, of everything. When ownership becomes your default mode, when it's on me becomes your automatic response, that's when everything changes because you stop being someone that life happens to and you become someone who happens to life. You stop waiting for permission and you start giving yourself permission. You stop looking for someone to blame and you start looking for what you can control. You stop feeling powerless and you start accessing the incredible power that was inside you all along. So right now, today, this moment, what's one area of your life where you've been blaming external circumstances? What's one situation where you've been saying, it's not my fault, when you could be saying it's on me? Identify it, name it, and then take ownership of it completely and fully, not because you're at fault necessarily, but because taking ownership gives you the power to change it. This is how strong people think. This is how successful people operate. This is how you transform from someone who has things happen to them into someone who makes things happen. And it all starts with 3 simple words that carry infinite power. It's on me. Action beats motivation every time. Why waiting to feel ready keeps you stuck? Here's something that's going to sound counterintuitive at first, but once you really understand it, it will change everything about how you approach your goals and dreams. Motivation is completely overrated, almost useless actually, and the people who are waiting to feel motivated before they take action are the same people who will still be waiting 5 years from now wondering why their life hasn't changed. Let me explain what I mean, because this isn't about dismissing the importance of having drive or passion. It's about understanding the fundamental difference between motivation and action and recognizing which one actually creates results. Motivation is a feeling. It's an emotion. It's that surge of energy and excitement you get when you watch an inspiring video or read a powerful quote or attend a great seminar or make a New Year's resolution. And in that moment, you feel like you can conquer the world, like nothing can stop you, like you're finally going to do all the things you've been putting off. And it feels amazing. It feels powerful. It feels like this is it. This is the moment everything changes. But here's the problem with motivation. Feelings are temporary. Emotions are unreliable. That surge of energy fades, sometimes within hours, sometimes within days. And when it fades, most people stop taking action because they believe they need to feel motivated in order to act. This is the trap. This is what keeps people stuck in endless cycles of starting and stopping, getting excited and giving up, making plans and abandoning them. They're waiting for motivation to strike again, waiting to feel that surge of energy, waiting to be in the right mood. And while they're waiting, winners are taking action regardless of how they feel. Action, unlike motivation, is not a feeling. It's a behavior. It's something you do with your body, not with your emotions. It's a choice you make in the moment regardless of whether you want to or not. And here's the beautiful paradox that most people never discover. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. You don't need to feel motivated to start. You need to start in order to feel motivated. When you take action, even small action, even when you don't feel like it, something shifts in your brain, momentum builds, you start to feel better, you start to feel more capable, you start to feel more motivated, and suddenly you're doing the thing you couldn't get yourself to do when you were sitting around waiting to feel ready. This is why successful people, true winners in any field, they don't operate based on how they feel, they operate based on what they've committed to doing. An Olympic athlete doesn't wake up every single morning feeling motivated to train. There are plenty of mornings when they're tired, when they're sore, when they'd rather stay in bed, when the last thing they want to do is push their body to its limits. But they get up anyway. They show up to training anyway. They do the work anyway because they understand that motivation is fickle, but action is what produces results. A successful entrepreneur doesn't wait until they feel inspired to make sales calls or handle difficult conversations or work on their business. They do it anyway, on the good days and the bad days, when they feel confident and when they feel scared, when they're excited and when they're exhausted. A great parent doesn't only take care of their kids when they feel patient and energized. They show up for their children every single day, even when they're drained, even when they're stressed, even when they'd really like to just check out for a while. A dedicated student doesn't only study when they feel like it. They put in the hours even when they're bored, even when they're distracted, even when Netflix sounds infinitely more appealing. This is what separates the people who achieve their goals from the people who just talk about their goals. The doers understand that action is a habit, not a feeling, and habits by definition are things you do automatically, consistently, regardless of circumstances or emotions. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up every morning and ask yourself, I'm motivated to brush my teeth today. You just do it because of the habit. It's automatic. It's part of your routine. You've done it so many times that your body just does it without requiring an emotional justification. This is exactly how successful people approach the actions that matter for their goals. They turn those actions into habits, into non-negotiables, into things they simply do whether they feel like it or not. The writer sits down to write every day at the same time, not when inspiration strikes, because if they waited for inspiration, they'd never finish a book. The person who transformed their health goes to the gym on a schedule, not when they feel motivated, because if they waited for motivation, they'd work out twice a month instead of 4 times a week. The musician practices their instrument daily, not when they're in the mood, because if they waited for the mood, they'd never develop mastery. Now, I can already hear the objection that some people have to this message. But isn't it important to be passionate about what you do? Isn't it sad to just go through the motions without feeling? And yes, passion matters. Caring about your goals matters. Having a strong why matters enormously. But here's the thing. Passion isn't the same as motivation. Passion is deeper. It's the reason you chose the goal in the first place. It's the underlying purpose that sustains you over years and decades. But even passion doesn't mean you'll feel motivated every single day. You could be deeply passionate about something and still have days where you don't feel like doing the work. And on those days, action is what saves you. Action is what keeps you moving forward. Action is what maintains your progress while motivation takes a vacation. Let me give you a framework that makes this practical and applicable to your life right now. Instead of asking yourself, am I motivated to do this? Start asking yourself, what's the smallest action I could take right now? Because here's another secret about action. You don't need to take massive action to break through the motivation barrier. You just need to take some action, any action, and small actions are often easier to start than big ones. If you're putting off starting a workout routine because you don't feel motivated to do an intense hour-long session, forget about the hour-long session and just commit to putting on your workout clothes. Just that. Nothing else. And once you've done that, commit to stepping outside or getting on the treadmill for just 5 minutes. And what you'll find is that once you're actually in motion, you'll often continue beyond those 5 minutes because the hardest part was starting. The hardest part was overcoming inertia, and action, even tiny action, overcomes inertia. If you're putting off working on your business or your side project because you don't feel motivated to put in hours of work, forget about hours and just commit to doing one small task. Send one email, make one phone call, write one paragraph, design one element, whatever the smallest unit of progress is, do that. And then do another small thing, and another, and before you know it, you've had a productive session without ever feeling that mythical surge of motivation you thought you needed. This principle works for literally everything: cleaning your house, doing your taxes, having a difficult conversation, studying for an exam, applying for jobs, creating content, building relationships, anything that you've been putting off because you're waiting to feel like doing it. Stop waiting for the feeling and start with the smallest possible action, and then let momentum carry you forward. There's actually neuroscience behind why this works. Your brain has something called the anterior cingulate cortex, which is involved in decision-making and action initiation. And when you take action, especially action that aligns with your goals, your brain releases dopamine, which is the neurochemical associated with motivation, reward, and pleasure. So by taking action first, you're literally creating the chemical conditions in your brain that produce the feeling of motivation. This is why action beats motivation. Action creates motivation, but waiting for motivation often creates nothing except more waiting. Here's another critical insight. Motivation is often highest at the beginning of a journey when everything is new and exciting, and then it drops dramatically once the novelty wears off and the work gets hard. Now, today, in the next 60 minutes. If it's exercising, commit to putting on your workout clothes. If it's starting a business, commit to writing down 3 potential business names. If it's improving your relationship, commit to sending one kind text message. If it's learning something new, Commit to watching one 5-minute tutorial video. If it's getting your finances in order, commit to logging into your bank account and looking at your balance. Whatever it is, make it so small that you can't possibly fail, and then do it regardless of how you feel, and pay attention to what happens afterward. Pay attention to how taking that small action shifts something in you, how it creates a tiny bit of momentum, how it makes the next action slightly easier. This is how you break the motivation trap. This is how you become someone who gets things done. This is how you stop being a person that life happens to and become a person who makes things happen. Motivation is a fair weather friend. It shows up when things are easy and disappears when things get hard. But action is the friend who's there through everything, through the excitement and the boredom, through the confidence and the doubt, through the energy and the exhaustion. And that's the friend you want on your side if you're serious about creating a life that matters. Winners don't wait for motivation. They create it through action. They build it through consistency. They sustain it through discipline. And most importantly, they understand that the feeling of wanting to do something is not a prerequisite for doing it. It's often a result of having already started doing it. So stop waiting to feel ready. Stop waiting to feel motivated. Stop waiting to feel inspired. Stop waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect mood or the perfect circumstances, because that day may never come. And even if it does, it won't last. But if you build the habit of taking action regardless of how you feel, if you make doing the work a non-negotiable part of your identity, if you show up even on the days when you absolutely don't want to, then you'll create a life that far exceeds what motivation alone could ever build. Action beats motivation every single time. Not sometimes, not usually, but every single time. And the sooner you internalize this truth and start living by it, the sooner you'll look back and wonder why you ever thought you needed to feel a certain way before you were allowed to chase your dreams. Discipline is the real freedom. Why structure sets you free. There's this massive misunderstanding about discipline that keeps so many people trapped in chaos and stress. And it goes something like this. People think discipline is restrictive, that it's like putting yourself in a cage, that it's about denying yourself pleasure and fun, that it's rigid and suffocating and joyless, that disciplined people are somehow missing out on life while undisciplined people are living freely and spontaneously. But this couldn't be more wrong. This is literally the opposite of the truth, because discipline isn't a prison. Discipline is actually the thing that sets you free. Real freedom, lasting freedom. Meaningful freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you want whenever you want. That's not freedom. That's slavery to your impulses, slavery to your immediate desires, slavery to your emotions and cravings, and every distraction that comes your way. And people who live like this, constantly chasing the next bit of pleasure or avoiding the next bit of discomfort, they end up trapped in cycles they can't escape, trapped in jobs they hate because they never built skills, trapped in bodies they're uncomfortable in because they never established healthy habits, trapped in relationships that don't fulfill them because they never developed the discipline to be a good partner, trapped in financial stress because they never learned to delay gratification, and they wonder why their life feels so limiting when they thought they were living so freely. The paradox is that discipline, which looks like restriction from the outside, is actually what creates genuine freedom on the inside. And here's why. When you have discipline, when you have strong routines and habits and systems in your life, when you've trained yourself to do the right things consistently regardless of how you feel in the moment, that's when life becomes smooth. That's when the chaos disappears. That's when stress decreases. That's when you actually have more time and energy. And options, not fewer. Think about it practically. If you have the discipline to wake up at the same time every morning, suddenly your mornings aren't chaotic, you're not rushing, you're not starting the day in panic mode. You have time to ease into the day, maybe exercise, maybe meditate, maybe have a real breakfast, maybe plan your priorities, and this calm, productive start sets the tone for your entire day. If you have the discipline to plan and prep your meals, suddenly you're not scrambling for food at the last minute. You're not spending money on expensive takeout. You're not eating whatever junk is convenient. You're not dealing with the energy crashes that come from poor nutrition. You have the freedom to fuel your body properly without it being a daily struggle. If you have the discipline to manage your money, to budget, to save, to invest, suddenly you're not living paycheck to paycheck. You're not stressed every time an unexpected expense comes up. You're not trapped in a job you hate because you desperately need the money. You have options. You have security. You have the freedom to make choices based on what's right for you rather than what you can afford in this exact moment. If you have the discipline to exercise regularly, to move your body consistently, suddenly you have more energy, better mood, better sleep, better health. You're not tired all the time. You're not dealing with preventable health issues. You have the freedom that comes from having a body that works well and feels good. If you have the discipline in your relationships, to communicate clearly, to show up consistently, to do the work even when it's hard, suddenly you have deep connections instead of shallow ones. You have people you can count on. You have love and support that's real. You have the freedom that comes from secure attachments rather than the anxiety that comes from unstable ones. Can you see the pattern here? Every single area where people feel trapped and stressed and limited, it's almost always because they lack discipline in that area. And every area where people feel free and capable and at ease, it's because they've built disciplined routines and habits that run automatically in the background of their lives. Discipline is like setting up a really good operating system for your life. And once that operating system is running smoothly, everything else becomes easier. You have more mental bandwidth. You have more actual time. You have more money. You have more energy. You have more options. And options are what freedom actually is. Freedom is having choices, real choices, not just the illusion of choice. The undisciplined person thinks they're choosing freely when they hit snooze 5 times and rush out the door without breakfast, but they're not choosing, they're just reacting, they're being controlled by their immediate desire for comfort. And that choice costs them their peace, their health, their time, their effectiveness all day long. The disciplined person who gets up on time isn't being restricted, they're exercising real choice, the choice to prioritize their long-term well-being over short-term comfort. And that choice pays dividends all day in the form of energy, clarity, accomplishment, and yes, freedom. Now, I want to be really clear about something because discipline can be implemented in either healthy or unhealthy ways. Discipline should serve your life, not control it. Discipline should be a tool that helps you become who you want to be and create what you want to create, not a weapon you use to punish yourself or make yourself miserable. Healthy discipline is flexible. It has room for adjustment. It includes rest and recovery. It allows for enjoyment and spontaneity within a framework of structure. It's about creating systems that support you, not about being rigidly perfect all the time. If your discipline looks like berating yourself for every small deviation or never allowing yourself any pleasure or turning life into a joyless grind, that's not discipline. That's self-abuse disguised as discipline. And that will eventually break you. True discipline is actually quite compassionate. It's about caring for yourself enough to do the things your future self will thank you for. It's about respecting yourself enough to keep the promises you make to yourself. It's about loving yourself enough to build a life that works instead of one that constantly creates stress and regret. Let me give you a concrete example of how discipline creates freedom. Imagine 2 people. Person A has no discipline around their work. They work whenever they feel like it. They procrastinate when tasks are hard or boring. They get distracted constantly by social media and other people's demands. They work late into the night to catch up on things they should have done earlier. Their work bleeds into their personal time. They're always stressed about deadlines. They never really relax because there's always something hanging over them that they haven't finished. Person B has discipline around their work. They have set work hours and they stick to them. They do their most important tasks first thing when their energy is highest. They minimize distractions during work time. They focus intensely for set periods and then take real breaks. They finish their work during work hours and then they're done. They can fully engage with their evening and their relationships without work anxiety. Now ask yourself, who has more freedom? Person A thinks they have freedom because they don't have a rigid schedule, but they're actually trapped in constant stress and their work is always controlling them even when they're not working. Person B has structure and discipline, but they actually have genuine freedom because when they're done working, they're really done. They can be fully present in the rest of their life. They're not a slave to their work. Their discipline has set them free. This same principle applies to every area of life. The person with discipline around their diet has the freedom to enjoy food without guilt and have a body they feel good in, while the person without discipline is trapped in cycles of binge eating and restriction and constant anxiety about food. The person with discipline around their finances has the freedom to weather unexpected expenses and make choices based on their values, while the person without discipline is trapped by their financial situation and controlled by it. The person with discipline around their time has the freedom to accomplish what matters and still have space for rest and relationships, while the person without discipline is constantly overwhelmed and feeling like they never have enough time for anything. Here's another insight about discipline and freedom. Discipline is what allows you to trust yourself, and self-trust is one of the most liberating feelings you can experience. When you have discipline, when you consistently do what you say you're going to do, when you keep your commitments to yourself, you build this deep internal confidence that you can count on yourself, that you're reliable, that you're capable, and when you trust yourself like this, you're willing to take bigger risks, to try new things, to go after ambitious goals, because you know that even if it gets hard, you'll show up and do the work. But when you lack discipline, when you constantly break promises to yourself, when you can't count on yourself to follow through, you develop this deep distrust of yourself. And that distrust keeps you small, keeps you stuck, keeps you from attempting anything challenging because some part of you knows you won't see it through. This lack of self-trust is one of the most limiting prisons you can be in, and discipline is the key that unlocks it. The beautiful thing about building discipline is that it's completely within your control. Nobody can give it to you, and nobody can take it away. It's not dependent on your circumstances or your background or your resources. It's just a decision you make over and over again to do what you said you would do regardless of how you feel. And here's the really encouraging part. You don't have to be perfectly disciplined in every area of your life all at once. In fact, trying to do that is usually counterproductive because it's overwhelming and unsustainable. Instead, pick one area, just one, where more discipline would clearly improve your life. Maybe it's your sleep schedule. Maybe it's exercising 3 times a week. Maybe it's spending an hour each day on your side business. Maybe it's putting your phone away during dinner with your family. Whatever it is, pick one thing and focus on making that one routine absolutely non-negotiable for 30 days. Build that one piece of discipline into your life so solidly that it becomes automatic. And here's what will happen. First, that one area of your life will obviously improve. You'll sleep better or feel healthier or make progress on your business or connect more deeply with your family. Whatever benefit comes from that particular discipline, you'll experience it. But second, and this is even more important, you'll prove to yourself that you can be disciplined. You'll build that self-trust muscle. You'll experience the freedom that comes from having this one area of your life running smoothly. And that success will give you confidence and momentum to add discipline to another area, and then another. And over time, your whole life transforms, not through some massive overhaul all at once, but through building one disciplined routine at a time until you have this entire system of habits and practices that creates freedom throughout your day. Let me also address a common concern people have. But what about spontaneity? What about going with the flow? What about being present? Doesn't discipline interfere with all of that? And the answer is no, not at all. In fact, discipline enables spontaneity and presence because when the important stuff is handled, when your health and finances and work and relationships have strong foundations because of your disciplined routines, you're actually free to be spontaneous with the rest. You can say yes to unexpected opportunities because you're not constantly behind on everything. You can be present in the moment because you're not anxious about all the things you should be doing but aren't. You can go with the flow because you've built enough structure that a little chaos doesn't throw your whole life into disarray. The most spontaneous, present, in the flow people I know are actually incredibly disciplined in the fundamentals of their lives. They've automated the basics so well that they have tons of mental and emotional bandwidth available for creativity and spontaneity and presence. It's the undisciplined people who can't be present or spontaneous because their minds are always scattered, always worried, always dealing with the consequences of things they didn't do or did poorly. So here's what I want you to understand deeply. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. Discipline is the foundation of freedom. Discipline is what creates the space for freedom to exist. Discipline is what gives you back your time and your energy and your peace of mind and your options, and all of those things together are what real freedom actually feels like. When your routine is strong, When you have systems and habits that run automatically, when you've built discipline in the key areas of your life, that's when life becomes smooth instead of chaotic. That's when you stop feeling like you're constantly putting out fires and start feeling like you're building something meaningful. That's when stress decreases and satisfaction increases. That's when you actually have the bandwidth to enjoy life instead of just surviving it. So stop seeing discipline as a restriction and start seeing it as the most powerful form of self-love and self-respect. Stop thinking of discipline as something that takes away from your life and start recognizing it as the thing that gives you your life back, and start building it one routine at a time, one commitment at a time, one kept promise to yourself at a time, because every moment of discipline is an investment in your freedom. And that's an investment that always pays off. Your daily habits are your resume, what your actions say about who you really are. Listen carefully to this truth because it's going to challenge some comfortable lies you might be telling yourself. Who you are is not determined by what you say, not by your intentions, not by your dreams, not by your goals, not by the person you wish you were or plan to become someday. Who you are is determined entirely by what you do every single day, by your daily habits, by your repeated actions, by the choices you make when nobody's watching, by what you actually do versus what you say you'll do. Your daily habits are your real resume. They're the true record of who you are. And unlike the resume you send to employers, which you can carefully craft and edit to present your best self, your habit resume is brutally honest. It shows exactly what you prioritize, what you value, what you're committed to, and what kind of person you actually are beneath all the stories you tell yourself and others. Think about it this way. If someone followed you around with a camera for 30 days and recorded everything you did, every choice you made, how you spent every hour, what you ate, how you moved your body or didn't, how you treated people, how you spent your money, what you consumed with your mind, how you responded to stress, what you did in your free time, and then they compiled all of that data into a report. That report would be the most accurate description of who you are that could possibly exist, far more accurate than anything you could write about yourself, because that report would be based on behavior, not belief, on action, not intention, on what you actually do, not what you think you do or wish you did. This is uncomfortable for most people to hear, because there's usually a gap, sometimes a huge gap, between who we think we are and who our daily habits prove us to be. We think we're someone who values health, but our daily habits show someone who eats junk food and sits all day and doesn't move their body. We think we're someone who's ambitious and driven, but our daily habits show someone who scrolls social media for hours and watches Netflix every night instead of working on their goals. We think we're someone who values relationships, but our daily habits show someone who's always on their phone, who cancels plans, who doesn't make time for the people they claim to love. We think we're someone who's responsible with money, but our daily habits show someone who makes impulsive purchases and doesn't budget or save. We think we're someone who's learning and growing, but our daily habits show someone who consumes mindless entertainment instead of reading or developing skills. The gap between our self-image and our daily reality is often massive, and closing that gap, making our daily habits align with our stated values and goals, that's where transformation happens. That's where you actually become the person you say you want to be. Here's why this matters so much. Your daily habits are not just things you do, they're votes you're casting for the type of person you're becoming. Every single action is a vote, and you become what you vote for most consistently. If you go to the gym today, that's one vote for being a healthy person. If you skip the gym and eat fast food instead, that's one vote for being an unhealthy person, and no single vote determines who you are, but the pattern of votes over weeks and months and years. That's what actually creates your identity. You don't become healthy or unhealthy from one choice. You become it from thousands of small choices repeated consistently over time. You don't become successful or unsuccessful from one day's work. You become it from how you spend your days repeatedly. You don't become kind or cruel from one interaction. You become it from how you treat people habitually. Your identity is not something fixed that you either have or don't have. Your identity is something you're building every single day through your repeated behaviors. And the beautiful and terrifying thing about this is that it means you're always in the process of becoming. You're never stuck, but you're also never finished. Every day you're either becoming more of who you want to be or less of who you want to be. There's no neutral. There's no pause button. Your daily habits are constantly shaping you whether you're conscious of it or not. Let me give you some examples that might hit close to home. If you want to be a writer, but you don't write daily or even weekly, you're not a writer. You're someone who wants to be a writer, and there's a huge difference between those two things. Your daily habits of not writing are creating the reality of not being a writer, and all the talent and all the ideas and all the intentions in the world don't change that. But if you write for even 20 minutes every single day, even if what you write isn't great, your daily habits are creating the reality of being a writer. You're building that identity, and over time you become undeniably a writer because that's what your behavior shows. If you want to be a good parent, but your daily habits involve being distracted on your phone when your kids are talking to you, being impatient and yelling when they're being difficult, being too tired or busy to really engage with them, then your daily habits are creating the reality of being a disconnected parent, regardless of how much you love your kids or how good your intentions are. But if your daily habits involve putting your phone down when your kids need you, taking deep breaths and responding calmly even when it's hard, making time to really play with them or listen to them every single day, then you're becoming a good parent through your actions, and your kids will know it not because you told them you're a good parent, but because they experienced it. If you want to be financially stable, but your daily habits involve buying coffee out every day, ordering food instead of cooking, making impulsive purchases, ignoring your bank account, then you're not becoming financially stable. You're becoming someone who's perpetually stressed about money. But if your daily habits involve tracking your spending, making your coffee at home, cooking most of your meals, putting even small amounts into savings automatically, then you're becoming financially stable through your repeated actions, and eventually that stability becomes your reality. If you want to be someone who's knowledgeable and educated, but your daily habits involve scrolling social media, watching reality TV, consuming gossip and mindless content, then you're not becoming educated. You're becoming someone who knows a lot about pop culture and social media drama. But if your daily habits involve reading for 30 minutes a day, listening to educational podcasts, watching documentaries, engaging with challenging ideas, then you're becoming educated and knowledgeable through what you consistently consume. The pattern is always the same. You become what you repeatedly do, not what you occasionally do, not what you do when you feel motivated, not what you do when people are watching, but what you do consistently, habitually, automatically, especially when no one's watching, especially when it's hard, especially when you don't feel like it. Your daily habits are the most honest expression of your priorities because time and energy are limited resources, and where you consistently spend those resources reveals what actually matters to you. Not what you say matters to you, but what actually matters is proven by your behavior. If you say your health is important, but you never exercise and eat poorly every day, your daily habits are showing that your health is not actually a priority. Comfort is the priority. Convenience is the priority, but not health. If you say your family is the most important thing, but you work 80 hours a week and never make time for them, your daily habits are showing that work is the actual priority, not family. If you say you want to start a business, but you never work on it and spend your evenings watching TV instead, your daily habits are showing that entertainment is the priority, not entrepreneurship. This isn't about judging yourself harshly. It's about getting honest about the disconnect between your stated values and your lived values, because until you close that gap, until your daily habits align with what you say matters to you, you'll always feel a sense of dissatisfaction, a sense that your life doesn't match your vision for it. And that's because it doesn't. Your daily habits are creating a different life than the one you say you want. So here's the powerful shift that can change everything. Stop focusing so much on goals and outcomes and future versions of yourself, and start focusing entirely on your daily habits, on your systems, on what you do today and tomorrow and the next day. Goals are important for direction, but habits are what actually get you there. And more importantly, habits are what make you into the kind of person who naturally achieves those goals. If your goal is to lose 30 pounds, that's fine, but that goal by itself doesn't change anything. What changes things is adopting the daily habits of someone who's healthy, eating nutritious food in appropriate amounts, moving your body regularly, getting enough sleep, managing stress. And if you adopt those habits and maintain them, the weight loss becomes almost inevitable. And more importantly, you become a healthy person, not just someone who temporarily lost weight. If your goal is to build a successful business, that's great, but the goal doesn't build the business. What builds the business is adopting the daily habits of successful entrepreneurs, working on your business consistently, serving your customers well, learning and improving, managing money wisely, showing up even when it's hard. And if you adopt those habits, success becomes much more likely. And you become an entrepreneur in your identity, not just in your aspirations. If your goal is to have a great relationship, wonderful, but the goal doesn't create the relationship. What creates it is adopting the daily habits of a great partner, communicating openly, showing affection, being present, doing your share, choosing kindness even in conflict. And if you make those your habits, you become a great partner, and that naturally leads to a great relationship. The shift from goal-focused to habit-focused is profound because goals are about what you want to have or achieve, while habits are about who you want to become, and becoming the right kind of person makes achieving the right goals almost automatic. This is why your daily habits are your resume. They're not just actions, they're your identity being built in real time. They're proof of who you're becoming. And if you want to know where your life is headed, don't look at your goals or your dreams or your intentions. Look at your daily habits. Look at what you did today, what you did yesterday, what you'll likely do tomorrow. And if you follow that pattern forward, where does it lead? If you keep doing what you're doing now, every day for the next 5 years, who will you be? Where will you be? What will your health look like? What will your relationships look like? What will your finances look like? What will your skills and knowledge look like? That trajectory, that's your real future, not the one you fantasize about, but the one your current habits are actually creating. And if you don't like where that trajectory is headed, if there's a gap between the future your current habits are creating and the future you actually want, then you know exactly what needs to change. The daily habits, starting today, starting with one habit, one behavior, one choice that's more aligned with who you want to become. Maybe it's waking up 30 minutes earlier. Maybe it's reading 10 pages every day. Maybe it's exercising 3 times a week. Maybe it's putting your phone away during dinner. Maybe it's working on your side project for 1 hour before bed. Maybe it's meditating for 5 minutes each morning. Maybe it's tracking your spending every day. Maybe it's calling one friend or family member each week. Maybe it's practicing gratitude each night before sleep. Whatever it is, pick one habit that the person you want to become would definitely have and commit to it completely, non-negotiably, for at least 30 days until it becomes automatic. And here's what's going to happen. That one new habit will start to change how you see yourself. It will be evidence that you're becoming someone different, someone more disciplined, someone more aligned with your values, someone who keeps commitments to themselves, and that shift in identity will make the next habit easier to adopt, and then the next, and gradually. Your daily habits will transform from things that create a life you don't want into things that create the life you do want. Your resume will start to reflect the person you've been trying to become, and the gap between who you say you are and who you actually are will close. Remember this. You're not your thoughts. You're not your feelings. You're not your past. You're not even your stated intentions or goals. You're what you repeatedly do. You are your habits. You are your daily actions. You're the person that your behavior proves you to be. And that person is either someone you're proud of or someone you need to change. But the good news, the incredibly empowering news, is that you can change that person starting right now, today, with the very next choice you make, because every action is a vote for who you're becoming. So make sure you're voting for the person you actually want to be, not the person your old habits have been creating by default. Comfort is the enemy of growth. Why easy choices keep you stuck. There's a harsh truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. And it's this. Comfort is killing your potential. It's keeping you small. It's preventing you from becoming who you could be. And every time you choose what's easy over what's necessary, every time you choose what's comfortable over what's challenging, you're choosing to stay exactly where you are instead of growing into something more. Let me be clear about what I mean by comfort, because I'm not talking about basic security or reasonable rest or taking care of yourself. I'm talking about that constant gravitational pull toward the path of least resistance, toward Netflix instead of working on your goals, toward scrolling instead of reading, toward excuses instead of action, toward staying in your small familiar world instead of pushing into the unknown, toward temporary relief instead of lasting transformation. These comfort choices feel good in the moment. They really do. There's a reason we're drawn to them. Your brain is literally wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain, to conserve energy, to stay safe in the familiar. And for most of human history, that wiring kept us alive. But in the modern world, that same wiring keeps us stuck because the things that feel comfortable and safe in the moment are often the exact things that prevent us from growing. And growth, real meaningful growth, only happens when you step outside your comfort zone, when you do things that are hard and scary and uncertain, when you choose the uncomfortable path because you know it leads somewhere better, even though the comfortable path is right there tempting you with its immediate gratification. Think about every area where you've actually grown in your life, every skill you've developed, every challenge you've overcome, every version of yourself you've evolved into that's better than the previous version. And I guarantee you, none of that growth happened while you were comfortable. It happened when you were stretching, struggling, uncertain, maybe even scared. You didn't learn to walk by staying on the ground where it was safe. You learned by standing up and falling down and getting up again despite the discomfort and the fear. You didn't learn to read by avoiding books that were challenging. You learned by pushing through confusion until it clicked. You didn't develop any meaningful skill by only doing what was easy. You developed skills by doing things that were hard until they became easier. You didn't build confidence by avoiding situations that scared you. You built confidence by walking into scary situations and surviving them and realizing you're more capable than you thought. Every single time you grew, it was preceded by discomfort, by challenge, by pushing past what felt safe and easy. And yet, despite knowing this from your own experience, there's this constant temptation to choose comfort, to take the easy way, to avoid the discomfort that signals growth is possible. Let's get specific about what this looks like in real life, because comfort is sneaky. It disguises itself as reasonable choices, as self-care, as I deserve this, as just this once, as I'll start tomorrow, as I'm too tired right now, as 1,000 small justifications that seem totally valid in the moment, but are actually just comfort protecting itself from growth. It's choosing to watch another episode even though you told yourself you'd work on your business tonight. And that choice feels totally reasonable because you're tired and you've had a long day and you deserve to relax. But that comfortable choice means another day where you didn't move toward your goals, another day where the business you say you want to build stays just an idea. It's hitting snooze instead of getting up to exercise. And in that moment, it feels so reasonable because you're warm and tired and 5 more minutes won't hurt. But that comfortable choice means another day of not taking care of your body. Another day of breaking a promise to yourself. Another day of choosing immediate comfort over your long-term health. It's ordering takeout instead of cooking because cooking feels like too much effort right now. And that choice feels justified because you're busy and stressed and food is food. But that comfortable choice means another day of not nourishing your body properly. Another day of spending money you could be saving. Another day of letting convenience win over intention. It's avoiding a difficult conversation because it might be awkward or confrontational. And that avoidance feels smart because why create conflict when things are fine for now? But that comfortable choice means another day of unresolved issues, another day of resentment building, another day of staying in patterns that don't serve you or your relationships. It's staying in a job you hate because it's familiar and pays the bills, and starting over somewhere else feels risky and uncertain. And that choice feels practical because you have responsibilities and bills to pay, and what if it doesn't work out? But that comfortable choice means another year of your life spent doing something that drains you, another year of not pursuing what actually lights you up, another year of playing it safe while your potential sits unused. It's not starting that project or business or creative work because you don't know if it'll be good or if anyone will care, and it's scary to put yourself out there. And that avoidance feels protective because what if you fail or what if people judge you? But that comfortable choice means another month, another year, another decade of wondering what if, of living with unrealized potential, of staying small when you could be expanding. Can you see the pattern? Every single one of these comfort choices makes total sense in isolation. Each one seems reasonable and justified and not that big of a deal. But when you zoom out and look at the cumulative effect of choosing comfort over growth day after day, week after week, year after year, you see someone whose life is essentially the same as it was years ago, someone who's older but not more capable, someone who's surviving but not thriving, someone who's safe but not satisfied, someone who's comfortable but not growing, and that's the real cost of comfort. It doesn't feel like you're losing anything in the moment, but over time you lose everything you could have become. Here's what makes this especially insidious. Comfort provides temporary relief, but creates permanent stagnation, while discomfort provides temporary challenge, but creates permanent growth. So every time you choose comfort, you're trading your future for your present. You're trading who you could become for who you currently are. You're trading lasting satisfaction for temporary ease, and that's a terrible trade. But it's the trade millions of people make every single day without even realizing it, because the cost isn't immediate, it's cumulative. It shows up years later when you look around and realize you're stuck, you're unfulfilled, you're living a smaller life than you're capable of, and you wonder how you got here. And the answer is simple. 1,000 small, comfortable choices that seem totally reasonable at the time, but were actually keeping you from growing. Now let's talk about what growth actually requires, because understanding this will help you recognize when you're at a choice point between comfort and growth. And growth always requires some form of discomfort. It requires doing things before you feel ready. It requires being bad at something before you can be good at it. It requires uncertainty because you're stepping into territory you haven't navigated before. It requires effort because you're building something new. It requires vulnerability because you're putting yourself out there in ways that feel risky. It requires discipline because you're overriding your brain's preference for comfort and ease. It requires patience because results don't come immediately. It requires failure because you learn more from what doesn't work than from what does. It requires feedback and criticism, which never feels great even when it's helpful. It requires change, which means letting go of old identities and patterns even when they're familiar. It requires you to be uncomfortable consistently, repeatedly, willingly. And that's exactly what most people won't do. They'll tolerate discomfort when they have no choice, when life forces it on them. But they won't voluntarily choose it. They won't seek it out. They won't embrace it as the price of becoming more. And that's why most people don't grow much after a certain age. Not because they can't, but because they won't pay the price in discomfort that growth requires. Let me give you a framework that might help. Imagine your life as a series of concentric circles. The innermost circle is your comfort zone. It contains everything familiar, everything you already know how to do, every situation you've been in before, every skill you've already mastered, every identity you already embody. And staying in this circle feels safe and easy because there are no surprises, no challenges, no risks. You know exactly what to expect and how to handle it. Just outside your comfort zone is what's called the growth zone. This is where learning happens, where new skills are developed, where you stretch your capabilities, where you become more than you currently are. And this zone is uncomfortable by definition because you're doing things you're not good at yet. You're in situations you haven't mastered. You're building capacities you don't fully have. But this discomfort is productive. It's the feeling of growth happening. It's your brain and body adapting to new challenges and becoming more capable. Beyond the growth zone is the danger zone, where the challenges are so far beyond your current capabilities that they're not productive, they're overwhelming, and yes, you want to avoid that. But here's what most people do. They confuse the growth zone with the danger zone. They feel the discomfort of growth and interpret it as danger, as a sign they should stop, as evidence they're in over their head. And they retreat back to comfort when actually they were right where they needed to be in. That productive discomfort where growth happens. And this misinterpretation of discomfort keeps them stuck in their comfort zone forever, never growing, never expanding, never becoming more capable because they're not willing to tolerate the temporary discomfort that signals growth is occurring. So here's the skill you need to develop. Learn to distinguish between productive discomfort and actual danger. Learn to sit with the feeling of being uncomfortable without immediately running back to comfort. Learn to recognize that butterflies in your stomach, or that feeling of, I don't know if I can do this, or that sense of uncertainty. Those feelings aren't warnings to stop. They're signals that you're growing. They're signs that you're at your edge, pushing past your current limitations, expanding your capabilities. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but that's the whole point. Comfort means you're not growing. Discomfort means you are. This is why successful people, truly successful people in any field, they have a different relationship with discomfort than average people do. They don't enjoy discomfort more. They don't have some special gene that makes hard things easy for them. They just learn to interpret discomfort differently. They've learned to see it as information rather than as a stop sign. They've learned to welcome it as evidence they're doing something worthwhile rather than avoiding it as something to be feared. They've trained themselves to move toward discomfort instead of away from it, to seek out challenges instead of avoid them, to choose growth over comfort, even when every fiber of their being is screaming for the easy path. And here's what happens when you start making this shift, when you start deliberately choosing discomfort, choosing the hard workout instead of the couch, choosing the challenging project instead of the safe assignment, choosing the difficult conversation instead of silence, choosing to learn something new instead of staying with what you know, choosing to start the business instead of staying in the comfortable job, choosing to be vulnerable instead of guarded, choosing to try even though you might fail instead of not trying to avoid failure. What happens is that your comfort zone expands. Things that used to feel impossibly hard become manageable. Situations that used to terrify you become familiar. Skills that seemed out of reach become part of your toolkit. And you become genuinely more capable, more confident, more resilient, more adaptable, more resourceful. And that's growth. That's what we're talking about. Not just achieving goals, but actually becoming a different person, a stronger person, a more capable person, a person who can handle more, do more, be more, and that person emerges only through repeated exposure to discomfort, only through choosing the hard path often enough that it changes who you are. So let me ask you directly, where in your life right now are you choosing comfort over growth? Where are you taking the easy path when you know the hard path would lead somewhere better? Where are you making excuses, hitting snooze, avoiding challenge, staying small, playing it safe, choosing temporary relief over lasting transformation? Be honest with yourself, because until you can identify where comfort is holding you hostage, you can't break free from it. Maybe it's in your health. You know you should exercise and eat better, but it's uncomfortable, so you don't. Maybe it's in your career. You know you should be learning new skills or taking on bigger challenges or looking for better opportunities, but it's uncomfortable, so you stay where you are. Maybe it's in your relationships. You know you should be having real conversations or setting boundaries or being more vulnerable, but it's uncomfortable, so you keep things surface level. Maybe it's in your personal development. You know you should be reading more, learning more, working on yourself, but it's uncomfortable to face your shortcomings, so you distract yourself with entertainment. Maybe it's in your finances. You know you should be budgeting and saving and investing, but it's uncomfortable to look at the numbers and make hard choices, so you avoid it. Whatever it is, wherever comfort is keeping you stuck, that's where you need to deliberately choose discomfort. That's where growth is waiting for you. And yes, it will be hard. Yes, you won't feel ready. Yes, you want to quit. Yes, you'll be tempted to go back to what's comfortable, but if you push through that temporary discomfort, if you stay in the growth zone long enough for adaptation to occur, you'll emerge on the other side as someone more capable, and that capability becomes your new comfort zone. And then you get to choose the next level of discomfort, the next challenge, the next growth opportunity. And this is how you build an extraordinary life, not by being comfortable, but by consistently choosing discomfort in service of who you're becoming. So stop looking for the easy way. Stop waiting for it to feel comfortable. Stop choosing Netflix and excuses and temporary relief. And start choosing the uncomfortable decisions that actually create growth, because that's the only path forward. That's the only way to close the gap between who you are and who you could be. And that gap, that potential, that's too valuable to trade away for comfort. Do the work when nobody is watching. The true test of character and commitment. Let me tell you something about success and respect and achievement that cuts right through all the noise and gets to the heart of what actually matters. The work you do when nobody is watching, when there's no audience, no applause, no recognition, no social media likes, no validation, no one that'll pat you on your back or tell you you're doing great. That work, that invisible work, that's what determines everything. That's what separates the people who actually achieve something meaningful from the people who just perform achievement for others. That's what builds real character versus manufactured image. That's what creates lasting success versus temporary visibility. In America, in life, anywhere in the world, the people who earn genuine respect, the kind of respect that's deep and lasting and based on substance rather than appearance, Those are the people who do the work when nobody is watching, who show up when there's no spotlight, who maintain their standards when there's no one there to hold them accountable except themselves, who put in the hours and the effort and the discipline even when it's completely invisible to everyone else because they're not doing it for the applause. They're doing it because of who they've decided to be. And that decision, that commitment to excellence, even in private, that's what ultimately becomes visible in public. That's what creates results that can't be faked. That's what builds a foundation that can't be shaken. Think about what most people do. Really think about it honestly. Most people perform. They do the work when others are watching, when their boss is around, when their team is looking, when their social media followers are paying attention, when there's some immediate reward or recognition or accountability. They show up, they try hard, they present well, they want to be seen as hardworking and dedicated and excellent. But the moment no one is watching, the moment the boss leaves, the moment the camera is off, the moment they're alone with just themselves and their choices, the standards drop, the effort decreases, the discipline fades, they cut corners, they do the minimum. They tell themselves it doesn't really matter because no one will know. And this is exactly why most people stay average, because most of their life is lived when nobody is watching. Most of your hours are private. Most of your choices are invisible to others. And if you only bring your best self when there's an audience, you're only bringing your best self for a tiny fraction of your life, which means the other 90% of your life is building the real you, the private you, the person you are when it's just you and your choices and no external pressure to be anything other than what you naturally are. And if that private version of you is lazy or undisciplined or cuts corners or makes excuses, then that's who you actually are regardless of how you perform when others are watching. The performance is just an act, but the private choices, those are your character, those are your truth. Now let's talk about why this matters so profoundly, because when you do the work when nobody's watching, you're not just accomplishing tasks, you're building something much more valuable. You're building integrity, which is the alignment between who you say you are and who you actually are when no one is checking. You're building self-respect, which comes from knowing you keep your commitments to yourself, even when breaking them would be easy and invisible. You're building discipline, which is the capacity to do what needs to be done regardless of external motivation or accountability. You're building character, which is who you are in the dark when there's no reward for being good and no punishment for being bad except what you impose on yourself. And these things, integrity and self-respect and discipline and character, these are the foundations that everything else in life is built on. Your relationships, your career, your health, your achievements, everything of value rests on this foundation of who you are when nobody's watching. And if that foundation is weak, if you only show up when there's external pressure, then everything built on top of it is unstable. It can all come crashing down the moment the external pressure disappears. But if that foundation is strong, if you do the work regardless of who's watching, then everything you build on top of it is solid, lasting, real. Let me give you concrete examples of what this looks like, because this isn't abstract philosophy. This is practical daily choice making that determines your trajectory. It's the athlete who does the extra reps when the coach isn't counting, who watches film and works on weaknesses in their free time, who maintains their diet and sleep schedule even during the off-season when no one would know if they slacked off. And that athlete, that's who becomes great, not the one with more talent but less private discipline, not the one who only works hard during official practice but coasts when they're alone. The championships are won in the work nobody sees in the 10,000 hours of private effort that accumulate into public excellence. It's the entrepreneur who works on their business every single night after their day job, even though they're exhausted, even though they could be relaxing, even though no one would blame them for taking a break, even though there's no guarantee any of this effort will pay off, even though there are no customers yet to serve, no employees to impress, no investors to report to, just them and their laptop and their dream and their willingness to work toward it in complete obscurity. In that entrepreneur, that's who eventually builds something real, not the one who only works on their business when they feel inspired or when they can post about it on social media, but the one who shows up in private, consistently, persistently, when it would be so much easier to just watch TV instead. It's the student who studies thoroughly even for classes where attendance isn't tracked and work isn't graded, who actually reads the assigned material instead of just skimming for answers, who takes notes for their own learning rather than just to pass tests, who asks questions to genuinely understand rather than to impress the teacher. And that student, that's who develops real knowledge and capabilities, not the one who's optimizing for grades through minimal effort, not the one who's performing studiousness without actual learning, but the one who's committed to growth even when it's completely private and no one is measuring or evaluating it. It's the employee who maintains quality standards even on tasks no one will check, who does thorough work even when they could get away with superficial work, who takes initiative even when it won't be directly credited to them, who helps colleagues even when there's no recognition for it, who learns and improves even when the company isn't requiring it. And that employee, that's who gets promoted, gets opportunities, gets respect, not because they're performing well when the boss is around, but because they've built a reputation for excellence that comes from their private standards being as high as their public ones. And people can sense that. They can tell the difference between someone who's performing and someone who's genuinely committed to doing good work regardless of who's watching. It's the person working on their health who makes good food choices even when they're alone and no one would know if they ate junk, who exercises even when they could skip it without anyone noticing, who goes to bed on time even though they could stay up late since there's no one to answer to, who takes care of their body as a private commitment to themselves rather than as a public performance of health. And that person, that's who actually transforms their health permanently, not the person who eats well at restaurants where others can see, but terribly at home where they're alone, not the person who posts gym selfies but skips workouts when there's no one to witness them, but the person whose private choices align with their stated values, whose behavior when nobody's watching matches their behavior when everyone is. Can you see the pattern here? The work that matters most, the work that actually creates results, the work that builds something real and lasting. The work happens primarily in private, when nobody's watching, when there's no external validation or accountability, when it's just you and your choices and your commitment to being who you said you'd be. And this is actually great news because it means you don't need anyone's permission to start building the life you want. You don't need an audience. You don't need recognition. You don't need anyone to believe in you or support you or witness your effort. You just need to decide who you're going to be and then be that person, especially when nobody is watching, because that's where the real work happens. That's where character is forged. That's where excellence is built. Now, here's something really important to understand. Doing the work when nobody's watching is not about being a martyr or never getting recognition or hiding your accomplishments. It's about having your motivation come from internal standards rather than external validation. It's about being driven by who you want to become rather than by who others think you are. It's about your why being strong enough that you don't need constant feedback and applause to keep going. And paradoxically, ironically, beautifully, when you stop needing the recognition and you just focus on doing excellent work regardless of who sees it, that's when recognition tends to come. Because excellence that's real, that's built on a foundation of private discipline and genuine commitment. That kind of excellence can't be hidden forever. It shows up in your results, in the quality of your work, in how you carry yourself, in what you're capable of, and people notice, maybe not immediately, maybe not as quickly as you'd like, but eventually they notice. And when they do, the respect they give you is real, it's earned, it's based on substance, not performance. It's the kind of respect that lasts because it's rooted in truth, in who you actually are rather than in an image you've carefully curated. There's a beautiful quote that captures this perfectly. It says, "Work hard in silence. Let success make the noise." And that's exactly what I'm talking about. The people who are constantly talking about what they're going to do, constantly posting about their journey, constantly needing validation and recognition for every small step. Those people are usually the ones who don't actually accomplish much because they're getting their reward from the attention rather than from the work. They're satisfying their need for validation through performance rather than through achievement. But the people who just put their head down and do the work day after day, in obscurity, in privacy, without fanfare or applause, those are the people who wake up one day and realize they've built something real, they've achieved something meaningful, they've become someone capable, and then the success speaks for itself. Then the results are undeniable. Then the recognition comes naturally because there's actual substance to recognize. Let me also address the loneliness that comes with this, because doing the work when nobody's watching can feel isolating, especially in our current culture where everything is documented and shared and performed on social media, where it seems like if something isn't posted, it didn't happen, where everyone is constantly seeking validation and attention and likes, choosing to work in private, choosing to build in obscurity, choosing to let your results speak rather than constantly speaking about your intentions. That can feel lonely. It can feel like you're missing out, like you're not getting the support and encouragement others are getting, like maybe you're doing something wrong by not sharing everything. But here's what you need to understand. That loneliness is temporary, but the foundation you're building is permanent. The discipline you're developing in private will serve you for the rest of your life. The character you're forging when nobody's watching will determine everything about your future. And the people who are constantly seeking external validation, they might seem to be doing better in the short term because they're getting attention and likes and comments. But in the long term, most of them won't build anything substantial because they never developed the capacity to work without immediate reward. They never built the discipline to keep going when no one is cheering. They never learned to motivate themselves internally rather than relying on external validation. So their progress is inconsistent. Their commitment is conditional. Their success, if it comes, is often unstable because it's not built on a solid foundation of private discipline and genuine capability. So here's my challenge to you, and this is where theory becomes practice, where understanding becomes transformation. Identify one area of your life where you're going to commit to doing the work when nobody's watching, where you're going to stop performing and start building, where you're going to develop private standards that are even higher than your public ones. Maybe it's your health, and you commit to making good choices even when you're completely alone and no one would ever know what you ate or whether you exercised. Maybe it's your career, and you commit to learning and improving even when it's not required and won't be directly rewarded. Maybe it's your relationships, and you commit to being kind and thoughtful even in moments when no one witnesses it and no one will credit you for it. Maybe it's your creative work, and you commit to creating consistently even when you have no audience and no validation. Maybe it's your personal growth, and you commit to reading and reflecting and working on yourself even though it's completely invisible and you can't post about it. Whatever it is, pick one area and commit to 30 days of doing excellent work in that area when nobody's watching, no posting about it, no talking about it, no seeking recognition or validation. Just you, in your commitment, in your discipline, and your choice to be who you said you'd be even in complete privacy. And watch what happens. Watch how it changes you. Watch how your self-respect grows. Watch how your confidence becomes more solid because it's based on genuine capability rather than external validation. Watch how your character strengthens. Watch how your discipline becomes a real part of who you are rather than something you have to constantly force. And then, after those 30 days, look at the results you've created through that private work. And I guarantee you'll be amazed at what you accomplished when you stopped worrying about who was watching and just focused on doing the work. Remember, real respect in America, in life, anywhere, doesn't come from performance. It doesn't come from image. It doesn't come from social media presence or constant visibility. Real respect comes from substance, from results, from being genuinely excellent rather than just looking excellent, from having private standards that match or exceed your public ones, from doing the work when nobody is watching. Because that work, that invisible work that no one sees and no one applauds and no one validates in the moment, that's the work that builds everything real, everything lasting, everything meaningful. So stop performing and start building. Stop seeking applause and start seeking excellence. Stop working for recognition and start working for results. Do the work when nobody is watching, and eventually, when the results speak for themselves, everyone will be watching, but by then it won't matter because you won't need them to. You'll already have the only validation that actually matters, the validation that comes from knowing you kept your commitments to yourself, that comes from knowing your private self matches your public self, that comes from knowing you did the work even when no one was watching, and that knowledge, that integrity, that character, that's worth more than all the applause in the world. Stop talking. Start executing. Why ideas mean nothing without action. Here's a truth that's going to sting for a lot of people, but it needs to be said clearly and directly. Your ideas are worthless, completely and utterly worthless, And I don't mean that to be cruel. I mean it as a wake-up call because everyone has ideas, brilliant ideas, world-changing ideas, million-dollar ideas, ideas that could transform their life or their community or even humanity. Everyone you meet has a notebook full of ideas or a notes app packed with inspiration or a head buzzing with possibilities. Ideas are everywhere. They're abundant, they're cheap, they're a dime a dozen. They cost nothing to generate and nothing to share and nothing to endlessly discuss and debate and refine and perfect. And that's exactly why they're worthless, because value doesn't come from conception. Value comes from execution, and execution, real execution, finishing what you start, bringing ideas into reality, doing the actual work required to transform thought into thing. That's rare. That's valuable. That's what separates the dreamers from the doers, the talkers from the makers, the people who wish from the people who build, and the world, the marketplace, success, opportunity, rewards, recognition, money, impact. All of it goes to the executors. None of it goes to the ideators, because the world doesn't reward potential. The world doesn't reward intentions. The world doesn't reward plans or concepts or possibilities. The world only rewards results, actual, tangible, measurable. Results that exist in reality rather than just in your imagination. And results only come from execution, from doing the work, from taking your idea and going through the messy, difficult, unglamorous process of making it real. Let me be even more specific about why ideas are cheap. Right now, as you're reading this or listening to this, there are probably thousands of people who have the exact same business idea you have, the same app concept, the same book premise, the same product vision, the same service offering, the same creative project, whatever it is that you've been thinking about and planning and talking about. I guarantee you're not the only one who thought of it. Uniqueness of ideas is a myth. There are very few truly original ideas. Most ideas are variations on themes that many people have considered, but here's what matters. Of those thousands of people with the same idea, maybe 10 will actually start working on it. And of those 10 who start, maybe 2 will finish. And of those 2 who finish, maybe 1 will do it well enough and persist long enough to actually succeed. So the idea wasn't what made the difference. Everyone had the idea. The execution was what made the difference. The willingness to stop talking and start doing, the commitment to see it through, the discipline to keep going when it got hard and boring and frustrating, the perseverance to finish despite obstacles. That's what created the different outcome. Not the quality of the idea, but the quality and consistency of the execution. Think about all the time people waste talking about what they're going to do, telling friends about their plans, posting on social media about their intentions, discussing their goals at length, explaining their vision, describing their strategy, seeking validation for their ideas, getting feedback before they've built anything. And all of this talking feels productive. It really does. It gives you a little dopamine hit. It makes you feel like you're making progress. People might even encourage you and say, that's a great idea, or you should definitely do that. And you walk away feeling good, feeling like you're on your way, but you're not on your way. You haven't actually done anything. You've just talked, and talking about doing something is not the same as doing it. Talking about writing a book is not writing. Talking about starting a business is not building. Talking about getting healthy is not exercising. Talking about learning a skill is not practicing. Talking is easy. Talking costs nothing. Talking requires no risk, no vulnerability, no real effort, no chance of failure. And that's exactly why so many people get stuck in talking mode, because it gives them the emotional satisfaction of feeling like they're pursuing their goals without any of the actual difficulty of pursuing their goals. It's counterfeit progress. It's the illusion of movement without actual movement. And it's one of the most common ways people sabotage themselves without even realizing it. Here's what actually happens when you talk too much about your plans before you execute. First, you get the emotional reward from sharing the idea, from people's positive reactions, from imagining the future success, and your brain experiences that as actual accomplishment, even though you haven't accomplished anything. So some of your motivation to actually do the work gets satisfied by the talking, which makes you less likely to follow through. Second, you expose your fragile early-stage idea to opinions and doubts and questions before it's strong enough to withstand them. And well-meaning people might poke holes in your plan or express skepticism or give you reasons why it won't work. And even though these concerns might not be valid, They can kill your motivation before you've even started. Third, you create external accountability and expectations before you're ready for them. And now you're not just accountable to yourself, you're accountable to everyone you told. And that can create pressure that's paralyzing rather than motivating, or it can create embarrassment if you don't follow through, which then makes you avoid those people or feel like a failure. Fourth, and this is subtle but important, talking about your plans can become a substitute for actually executing them. You become someone who's always planning to do something rather than someone who does things. And that becomes part of your identity. You become the person with potential who's going to do great things someday, rather than the person who's doing things right now. And that identity shift from doer to planner can be really hard to reverse. So here's a radical suggestion. Stop talking about what you're going to do and just start doing it quietly, privately, without announcement or fanfare or seeking validation. Just put your head down. Act like your future self today, the power of living into who you're becoming. There's a mental exercise that has the power to transform every single decision you make, every action you take, every choice you face. And it's deceptively simple, but profoundly powerful. And it goes like this. Imagine the person you want to be 5 years from now, not just what you want to have achieved or what you want to own or what your circumstances look like, but who you actually are as a person, the qualities you possess, the habits you've built, the character you've developed, the way you think and act and respond to life, the standards you hold yourself to, the discipline you embody, the wisdom you've gained, the person you become through 5 years of growth and effort and transformation. Really see that person clearly in your mind. Visualize them in detail. How do they spend their mornings? How do they handle stress? How do they treat other people? How do they manage their time and energy and resources? What do they say yes to, and what do they decline? How do they show up when things are hard? What are their non-negotiables? What drives them? What matters to them? Get a crystal clear picture of this future version of yourself. And then, and this is where the magic happens, make every decision today as if you already are that person. Act like your future self today, not tomorrow, not next week, not when you feel ready or when circumstances change, but right now in this moment. With this very next choice you make, ask yourself, what would my future self do in this situation? And then do that thing. Make that choice. Take that action. Because here's the profound truth that most people never realize. Your future self isn't someone you become suddenly 5 years from now through some magical transformation. Your future self is being created right now, today, through the accumulation of the choices you make moment by moment, decision by decision, action by action. You become your future self one choice at a time, and the fastest way to become that person isn't to wait 5 years and hope you somehow transform. It's to start being that person right now, to close the gap between who you currently are and who you want to become, not through time, but through choice, through deciding that starting today, you're going to operate as the person you're becoming rather than as the person you've been. Let me break down why this is so powerful and why it works, because understanding the mechanism makes it easier to implement and trust. And the reason acting like your future self today is so transformative is that it creates what psychologists call identity-based behavior change, where your actions flow from who you believe you are rather than from what you're trying to achieve. And when you consciously make decisions as your future self, you're essentially trying on that identity. You're practicing being that person. You're sending signals to your brain that this is who you are now, not who you might become someday. And your brain, through a process called cognitive consistency, wants your behaviors to match your identity. So when you start acting like your future self, your brain starts to believe you are that person, and that belief reinforces the behaviors, which strengthens the identity, which reinforces the behaviors even more, creating an upward spiral where you're literally becoming your future self in the present moment through the simple act of making choices aligned with that identity. Think about how radically different your day would look if you made every decision from the perspective of your future self. Imagine you want to be someone 5 years from now who's healthy and fit and energetic, someone who's built a successful business or advanced significantly in their career, someone who's financially secure and wise with money, someone who has deep, meaningful relationships, someone who's learned and grown and developed new skills, someone who's disciplined and focused and intentional about how they live. Now, imagine you wake up tomorrow morning and you face your first decision of the day. The alarm goes off, and you can either get up or hit snooze, and instead of making that decision based on how you feel in the moment, based on the tired person you currently are who just wants 5 more minutes of sleep, you ask yourself, what would my future self do? The person who's healthy and disciplined and accomplished, what would they do in this moment? And the answer is obvious. They would get up, not because it's easy or comfortable, but because that's what disciplined people do. That's who they are. So you get up, you act like your future self, and immediately, with that very first decision of the day, you've closed the gap a tiny bit between who you are and who you're becoming. You've cast a vote for your future self. You've practiced being that person. Then you're in the kitchen deciding what to have for breakfast, and again you have a choice. You could grab something quick and unhealthy, something convenient that you've always eaten, or you could take a few minutes to prepare something nutritious that fuels your body properly. And instead of making the decision based on convenience or old habits, you ask, what would my future self eat? The person who's healthy and energetic and takes care of their body? And you know the answer, they would. Choose the nutritious option, not as a sacrifice or as diet restriction, but simply because that's what they do. That's aligned with who they are. So you make that choice. You act like your future self again, another small decision that's creating who you're becoming. Throughout your workday, you face dozens of choices. Do you scroll through social media or focus on important work? Do you avoid that difficult conversation or address it directly? Do you do the minimum required or deliver excellence? Do you react emotionally to frustration or respond with patience and professionalism? Do you waste time on low-value activities or invest it in high-leverage tasks? And at each of these decision points, you can operate as your current self, as the person you've always been with the habits and patterns and tendencies you've accumulated, or you can ask, what would my future self do? The successful, accomplished, focused version of me. And make the decision from that identity. And every time you choose to act like your future self, you're not just making a better decision, you're literally sculpting yourself into that person. You're training your brain, building new neural pathways, establishing new patterns, becoming someone different one choice at a time. In the evening, you're deciding how to spend your free time. You could default to your usual routine of passive entertainment, scrolling and watching and consuming content that doesn't really add value to your life, or you could spend that time in ways your future self would spend it. Working on a meaningful project, reading something that expands your knowledge, practicing a skill you want to develop, connecting deeply with people you care about, taking care of your health through movement or proper sleep preparation. And again, the question is simple. What would my future self do with this evening? And when you answer honestly, when you think about the person you want to become and how they would use this precious resource of time, the answer becomes clear, and you can choose to act on that answer, to be that person now, rather than continuing to be who you've always been. This approach works in every area of life, in every type of decision, big and small, important and mundane, because your future self, the person you want to become, they have different standards. If this message challenged you, that's a good thing. Growth is uncomfortable, and comfort has already cost you enough. The question is simple. Will you apply what you heard, or will this be just another piece of content you forget tomorrow? If you're serious about building discipline, ownership, and real success, subscribe to this channel. This is not entertainment. This is training for your mindset. Like this video, so this message reaches more people who are tired of excuses and ready to take control of their lives. And comment below, what's one habit you need to fix starting today? Saying it out loud is the first step toward accountability. Finally, share this with someone who needs a wake-up call, because sometimes one message at the right moment can change a life. Remember, success doesn't start with motivation. It starts with you.